We hear these stories all the time, right? Tales of immigrant success, celebrating that incredible journey from being a newcomer to becoming an economic powerhouse. But what happens when we look past the headlines, when we really dig into the data? Well, the picture gets a whole lot more complicated. It reveals these hidden challenges and some really surprising outcomes that might just change how you think about integration.
So, picture this. A family arrives in a new country. What does success actually look like for them? Is it just about the size of their paycheck? Or is there a lot more to the story? To really get it, we have to look way beyond those surface-level numbers.
So how do experts actually measure all this? We're going to start right there, by defining what successful integration really means when we're talking about economics.
Okay, so at its core, the term is economic integration, and really, it's all about closing the gap. The idea is that an immigrant group, on average, should have pretty similar economic outcomes, income, jobs, to the people in their new home country. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it?
Well, not so fast. Just comparing those raw averages can actually hide a much more interesting and sometimes a much more troubling reality.
Let me give you a quick example. Let's say you have two groups. In Group A, 20% of the people have a university degree. But in Group B, 50% do. They're way more educated. You'd automatically expect Group B to be earning a lot more money, wouldn't you?
But what if they don't? What if their average incomes are exactly the same? Well, then something is definitely holding that more educated group back. They are not getting the payoff they should for all their qualifications. It points to some kind of hidden barrier, an invisible wall.
And this unseen disadvantage, that's the central idea we're going to unpack. Researchers actually have a name for it. They call it the economic penalty.
Think of it like this. Statisticians take all the usual factors into account, things like education, experience, age. The penalty is the gap that's still left over after you've explained everything else. It's that mystery, right? The difference between where a group should be based on their qualifications and where they actually are.
So, what is this statistical ghost in the real world? Well, it can be a whole bunch of things. It might point to discrimination. It could be about how hard it is to break into local social networks to find the best jobs. Or maybe it's foreign degrees just not being recognized. It can even reflect cultural norms, like traditional gender roles that might affect women's work, for example. But the story definitely doesn't stop with the people who first arrive. The really crucial question is, does this penalty stick around? Or does it start to fade away over time with the next generation?
And here's where the picture gets a lot brighter. For many immigrant groups, their kids, the second generation, do so much better than their parents. And it makes sense, right? They grow up in the new country, they speak the language perfectly, they go through the local schools.
This data from France is a fantastic example. For first-generation immigrants from the Maghreb region of North Africa, that income penalty was sitting at about 10.5%. But for the second generation, it shrank to just over 6%. That is a huge leap forward in just one generation.
And it gets even more fascinating, because sometimes the children of immigrants don't just close the gap, they actually start to do better than the native-born population.
Just look at this data from Britain. By the second generation, people of Chinese heritage were earning, on average, a little bit more per hour than native Britons. And those of Indian heritage, they had achieved perfect parity. They were earning the exact same. I mean, that is just remarkable upward mobility.
But, and this is a really important but, this story of upward mobility isn't universal. The reality is far more complex. Different groups have vastly different experiences, and it turns out they're shaped by a handful of key factors.
So, the research shows three major patterns seem to emerge. First, high-skilled immigrants often do really, really well. Second, low-skilled labor immigrants and their children can struggle across generations. And the third really crucial factor is religion. It can lead to totally different outcomes, even for people from the exact same country.
This quote from an analysis of UK data is super direct and clear. It's just neutrally reporting a finding that comes up again and again. When you compare people from the same region, the employment penalty was often higher for those who identified as Muslim.
And here's a really stark way to see that. Among Black immigrants in the UK, the employment penalty for Christians was 2.2%. For Black Muslims, it was nearly double that, at 3.9%. And that's even after accounting for all the other factors. A study in France really drilled down on this with incredible precision. They compared Christian and Muslim immigrants from Senegal, who were otherwise totally similar. The result? A €400 difference in average monthly household income. That is a significant, real-world gap that you couldn't explain away with education or other typical factors.
And of course, cultural factors can also play a major part, especially around gender roles. In Britain, for example, the percentage of women who are inactive in the labor market was way higher among Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities. 59%, compared to Indian or white British women. And that, of course, has a big impact on overall household income.
So, okay, we've looked at all this data. What's the big takeaway here? Why is it so important to get our heads around all these nuances?
I think the key message is that there is no single immigrant story. The path to economic integration is shaped by this complex mix of a person's background, their skills, their culture, and the specific societal barriers they might face in their new home.
The journey we just took in this explainer, it's exactly the same path the research follows. We started with the simple stuff, the averages. Then we adjusted for qualifications to get a clearer view. And that penalty that was left over, it forces us to look at deeper issues that the stats alone can't fully explain.
And that leaves us with a final and pretty crucial question. Being able to measure these hidden penalties, that's an incredibly powerful tool. It transforms this vague sense of inequality into a hard data point. So, now that we can see the problem, now that we can measure it, what's our responsibility to fix it?